Be recording. We will be recording today, so please note if you would prefer to not have your face shown, to keep your camera turned off. If you are with the press, we ask that you send a message to the person named quote unquote questions with your name and outlet. All questions for our open Q&A should be directed to the person named quote unquote questions. We would like to remind everyone that anyone who is disruptive or disrespectful will be removed from the Zoom.
We do want to give some context on the campaigns that are being represented today and that the speakers will be talking about. And so we'll start with Rim of the Pacific, the Cancel RIMPAC campaign. Rim of the Pacific is the largest military exercise held anywhere in the world and takes place every 2 years in US-occupied Hawaii. Organizers in Hawaii have been mobilizing against RIMPAC for decades, drawing attention to the environmental degradation, violence against women, and overall negative impact on the people living on the islands. RIMPAC is effectively the Super Bowl of the military, where they flex their strength by sinking ships, testing new weapons technology, and training for war. Today is an important and significant day to hold this press conference as RIMPAC's opening banquet is kicking off tonight in San Diego with the heads of US and foreign militaries. Tomorrow kicks off the official military exercises in Hawaii, where troops from over 29 different countries, 40 surface ships, over 150 aircraft, and 25,000 troops will spend a month wreaking havoc in and around Hawaii, around the islands. Countries participating this year are close allies of the US, including the Philippines, South Korea, Japan, Israel, India, and Australia. We know that RIMPAC does not advance the interests of the majority of people in the US and other participating countries, and instead serves to advance the US's buildup to war in the Indo-Pacific and all over the world. Why else would countries participating and those who are waging genocide include those who are waging genocidal campaigns such as Israel, or those who aren't even located in the Pacific Rim, such as the Netherlands, France, or Belgium? Today, together with the Resist NATO coalition, we denounce the RIMPAC war games and demand an end to military exercises in unequal agreements. We uphold the fight for national sovereignty, free of foreign military intervention and influence, and support the struggle of all people from Hawaii to the Philippines and all over the world to cancel these games once and for all.
Thank you, Katie. Definitely just shows the solidarity between Hawaii and the Philippines, just as the West Coast is preparing against the RIMPAC campaign, the RIMPAC exercises, we see from the East Coast how 1/3 of the participants in the RIMPAC exercises are also NATO members. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization, aka NATO, is the world's largest military alliance, bringing the military powers of Europe under the control of the US. Since its creation in DC in 1949, NATO has served as the armed wing of US-led imperialism, mobilizing its 32 member nations to wage brutal wars of aggression and military occupations, causing the deaths and displacement of millions of people from Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, and more. This upcoming NATO summit on July 9th to 11th marks the 75th anniversary of the signing of the North Atlantic Treaty in DC, the founding of NATO. Summits are meetings with the highest level of the North Atlantic Council, composed of heads of state and government officials. Major policies will introduce new sanctions, military budgets, unities on military conflicts, mass surveillance, and cyber war initiatives, none of which will be in the interest of the international working class and oppressed, but rather the imperialist leaders with the US at their head. But as the economic crises of the world continue to worsen, as the militarization of countries intensifies, so does the people's resistance. We must continue this fight to bring the democratic and revolutionary forces of the world together to oppose NATO, oppose wars of aggression, and bring down US imperialism. We will now pass it off to our first speaker, Eric, with Malaya San Diego, who will speak on the impacts this has on the communities in San Diego.
Thank you. In opposition to the opening day of RIMPAC 2024, this morning, San Diegans unfurled a Cancel RIMPAC banner on the bridge connecting Petco Park and the San Diego Convention Center. For months, community organizations and local activists have been raising awareness across San Diego about the destructive and detrimental Rim of the Pacific military exercises, which are being launched right here in our backyards. This campaign to cancel RIMPAC in San Diego kicked off on Earth Day, April 22nd, when hundreds of people from across Southern California launched a march and rally protesting the Exponential Weapons Manufacturer Conference at the San Diego Convention Center. The San Diego Association of Governments, or SANDAG, and San Diego Mayor Todd Gloria have bent over backwards to fast-track the needs and desires of the U.S. military. As early as 2020, SANDAG had already committed $50 million in funds to support Planning Command, or NAVWAR, facilities near Old Town San Diego, which then State Assembly member Todd Gloria led the effort in skirting California environmental regulations to expedite the project. In 2021, SANDAG began a serious study of the climate resilience of San Diego's military installations. They studied the area and neighborhoods around Naval Base San Diego to ensure naval bases remain operational in response to climate change. Yet earlier this year, on January 22nd, a major storm hit San Diego, causing massive flooding in these very same neighborhoods near the base. And to this day, there are hundreds of flood victims who have lost everything and still have not been able to return to their homes. Merely a month later, at the San Diego Military Advisory Council's West 24 brunch, Todd Gloria openly said, "There's a lot going on in the city. We've got homelessness, we've got housing affordability, we've got infrastructure, we've got natural disasters. The list goes on and on. It's easy to lose focus." And then he said, "It's important to have an advisory council embedded in its administration focused on supporting the military and their personnel. Where are their priorities?" San Diego is home to a significant Filipino population, and these RIMPAC exercises are rallying the navies of nearly 30 countries to provoke war with China, putting our relatives and loved ones back in the Philippines more at risk of losing their lives and getting caught in the crossfire of a war they do not want. Should war break out between the US and China, it will be Filipinos that suffer, Koreans that suffer, Japanese that suffer, Okinawans that suffer, because these are the countries and islands where the US has set up its military bases and installations to encircle China, which makes the people who live there a target for attack. Also, that the US can sell more of its new warfare technologies being developed right here at NAVWAR in San Diego to the navies of the dozens of countries participating in RIMPAC, all the while causing increased exploitation of women, as well as damage to the environment and wildlife around Hawaii. This is why we in San Diego stand alongside communities in Hawaii to echo their longstanding demand to cancel RIMPAC. This weekend, there will be a conference in San Diego to oppose RIMPAC and a march and rally in protest that people can join this Sunday at 2 p.m. in downtown San Diego. Hope to see you there.
Thank you so much, Eric, for exposing the true priorities of the local San Diego government, which results in the neglect of the people of San Diego, and for showing also how the local issues are linked globally wherever there are US military bases. Next, I'd like to invite Rose from Jewish Voices for Peace Hawaii to share more on the history of organizing against RIMPAC on the Hawaiian Islands.
Aloha mai kako, and good morning, everyone. I want to start by sharing my gratitude with the organizers of this year's National Cancel RIMPAC campaign, today's speakers, and all anti-war activists, past, present, and future, who speak truth to power by resisting RIMPAC and the US-led war machine. My name is Rose Elevitz. I'm an organizer with Jewish Voice for Peace Hawaii and a member of the Cancel RIMPAC Hawaii Coalition. As we gather today, the imminent threat of RIMPAC looms over our heads. Over the next 6 weeks, Hawaiian lands, waters, and skies will be desecrated at the hands of the US military and 28 of its allies, including the genocidal entity called Israel. In the name of a so-called free and secure Indo-Pacific, these war games are not games at all. They are an actual war with devastating impacts for Kanaka Oiwi and all residents of Hawaii. For 53 years, the RIMPAC exercises have only terrorized and endangered humans and the complex living ecosystems of the Pacific. The rate of sex trafficking disproportionately affecting Native Hawaiian women and girls rises 30% during RIMPAC. The use of Navy sonar has been proven to confuse and harm whales, leading to mass die-offs and beachings. The well-being of people, land, and water are not a concern to the US military agenda. This year, the Israeli occupation forces joined RIMPAC to share their genocidal weaponry and strategies. The tools and technology of the active genocide that has murdered over 50,000 Palestinians and continues to starve, displace, maim, and traumatize millions more is now coming to our shores. Palestine is a weapons testing ground for Israeli weapons that are exported throughout the world to buyers like Japan, France, Brazil, Australia, and more, all of whom are active participants in this year's RIMPAC. Like Gaza, Hawaii too is a testing ground for weapons and trainings. The bombs that are tested in the sacred Makua Valley are the same bombs dropped in Gaza. The white phosphorus responsible for choking and burning innocent Palestinians to death is the same white phosphorus discharged in Makua. Countries like Colombia and Chile, who have condemned Israel's genocide on the Palestinian people by cutting diplomatic ties with Israel, continue to partner with the Israeli occupation forces through this year's RIMPAC exercises. How can these countries claim to resist Israel's oppressive military regime while learning from their genocidal tactics and using their brutal weaponry? We know that militarism is a disease that infects us all, killing our communities and poisoning our right to live safely with a healthy ecosystem. As Jews living in the illegally occupied Hawaiian Kingdom, we join in solidarity with one another to fortify indivisible people power, fostering a future free from military aggression and endless wars of desecration. We do so knowing we stand on the shoulders of past generations of anti-military Pacifica freedom fighters who have resisted RIMPAC since its inception in 1971. In the early 1980s, RIMPAC resistance, spearheaded by the Protect Kaho'olawe Ohana, fought to end the exploitation of the sacred island. With their determination, Kaho'olawe has been going through a process of physical and cultural restoration and has not been bombed since 1990. I share this monumental victory with you today to demonstrate the possibility of defeating the US military regime when we are steadfast in our commitment to a military-free Pacific. We continue this fight today through our Cancel RIMPAC Hawaii Coalition, composed of grassroots organizations and individuals based in the Hawaiian Kingdom. We are devoted to ending the expansion of military aggression by the US and its partners in the Pacific. As a diverse coalition, we stand united in our commitment to uplifting and centering the voices of people most vulnerable to the biennial RIMPAC assault. We accomplish this through educating and informing the broader masses, particularly youth, students, and the working class, on the history, extent, and nature of the RIMPAC exercises and their relation to the expanding militarization of the Pacific. Our coalition recognizes the power of art as a tool of resistance, supporting our coalition's members' efforts to our collective mission through music shows, zines, the writing of op-eds, street theater, making posters, and more. Hawaii's people have raised their voices and demanded an end to the genocide in Palestine, and we have been working for decades to end the military occupation of Hawaii to restore Hawaiian sovereignty. We want to reiterate, for Hawaiians and their allies, RIMPAC war games are a real war. The nuclear-free Pacific movement organized fiercely against nuclear weapons because they knew the devastating impact of nuclear tests. The dropping of bombs anywhere, whether it is named a test or a game or a war, has the same impact on our people and our ecosystem. We refuse to be another generation of tests for the weapons industry. We know that our military communities are also poisoned first. The most recent fuel and PFOS contamination at Kapukaki or Red Hill in 2021 show us that no level of affiliation or allegiance to the US military will keep you safe from its indiscriminate and chaotic brutality. Amidst this mass death and destruction, we carry forward in our collective vision for a future where economies are driven by the safety and security for all beings. We say no to militarism, no to endless wars, and yes to life, yes to solidarity, yes to self-determination, and yes to the proliferation of our lands and our cultures. Free Palestine, free Hawaii, return Makua, and cancel RIMPAC. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rose, for bringing the perspective of those who have been most impacted by RIMPAC's war on the people and who have been resisting since 1971, and for drawing attention to the ways that RIMPAC is supporting the genocide in Gaza and the attacks against Indigenous Hawaiians and all people on the islands by allowing Israel to participate in these exercises. Next, we'd like to invite Zai from the African National Women's Organization and African People's Socialist Party to share more about the impact of militarization on African women in San Diego.
I just want to start out by saying thank you for this invitation. My name is Zai Wadisa, and I serve as the San Diego representative and the director of recruitment and membership for the African National Women's Organization, also known as ANWO. Before I start, I want to salute my leadership, Chairman Amalia Shatella, founder of the African People's Socialist Party and leader of the African Nation, as well as the president of the African National Women's Organization, Yejide Orunmila. ANWO is an anti-imperialist, anti-colonial revolutionary African women's organization, leading on the everyday issues that impact the lives of African women. And as a member organization of the International Women's Alliance, I was asked to share some of the conditions or some of the things that women face as a result of the militarization. And then last, I will share some conditions that African women in San Diego face on the daily in this city. And then summing up with our biggest campaign that we have right now. So in general, women experience heightened violence when the military is at play, including sexual assault, harassment, domestic abuse. Exposure to the conflict and war can lead to trauma, affecting mental and physical health. Displacement and disruption also take place. Militarization can force women and families to flee their homes due to conflict and military operations. And this displacement disrupts social networks, education, and economic stability. This also furthers gender roles and stereotypes. Militarization reinforces traditional gender roles, portraying men as protectors and women oftentimes as passive victims. And then women's participation in combat roles is often met with resistance and further stereotypes. The health and environment are also harmed during this time, affecting women's health through pollution, destruction, and exposure to hazardous materials. And then to look at, economic inequalities, military spending diverts resources from social services, impacting women's access to education, healthcare, and employment. And when women bear the brunt of economic hardships, this puts the family in a bad place in general. So in summary, the militarization of women exacerbates the existing inequalities that we face. And now I'm going to switch and talk a little bit about, just African women and the conditions of Africans here in San Diego. So truth be told, like when folks would like to believe that they have beat the odds and they've made it because they're living in America's finest city. They would also like to believe that the US government is progressive and has provided them a way to escape poverty and for an opportunity for them to see the world via the US military. The reality is the African population in San Diego is no exception to the norm and experiences various degrees of oppression. In October of 2023, the San Diego Foundation and the San Diego Regional Policy and Innovation Center published a report detailing economic equity in San Diego County, and that they found that Black San Diegans unequivocally face the brunt of economic, health, and housing inequities. So Black or African residents lived in poverty at more than twice the rate of their white counterparts here in San Diego. Black children living in San Diego were 2.5 times more likely to be living in poverty. Also, with the infant mortality rates being extremely high, where women and children are 3 times more likely to die in childbirth. And Black students, twice as likely not to be housed, twice as likely not to have health insurance, and then incarceration rate 6 to 7 times higher than that of the white incarceration rate. But I want to say that we're not surprised by these statistics. We understand that Africans in the United States are domestically colonized, and we recognize that the trade of African people played a critical role in the economic and political development of the United States. It was the rape of Africa that transformed the world. And it's now that we see more than ever the Black face of imperialism. You have more and more African officials holding these positions of power and, carrying on the, U.S. imperialism. We must wage the domestic struggle of the colonized here in the United States so that, we recognize that we are part of the front of the international struggle against Western imperialism being here in the belly of the beast. So it is clear that African people understand the fight to overturn colonialism. And, our struggle is not isolated, that it encompasses everybody who's been touched by colonial domination, whether that be the colonized people here in San Diego, Hawaii, the Philippines, or Palestine. We're all waging the same war against various manifestations of colonialism. So we stand in solidarity and we say, end the RIMPAC military games. Uhuru. I'm not sure how much time I have left. If I did want to speak about the Uhuru 3, so if you can just give me a time check. Two minutes? Okay, cool. All right, so the Uhuru 3 consists of Chairman Omali Yeshitela of the African People's Socialist Party, as well as Penny Hess, the chair of the African People's Solidarity Committee, and then Jesse Neville, who is the chair of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. And in April of 2023, the Uhuru 3 were indicted by the US government on bogus charges that, they were agents of a foreign government, because the Uhuru 3 has, the Uhuru movement has put in over 50 years of work to advocate for the liberation and unification of Africa, and, pushing that Africans be united everywhere that we are located. So the charges levied on the Uhuru 3 came 9 months after the FBI and local police violently raided 7 homes and properties of the African People's Socialist Party and the Uhuru movement. Those properties being in St. Louis, Missouri, and in St. Petersburg, Florida. These charges carry prison sentences of up to 15 years each. So on September 28th, 2023, we did submit a motion to dismiss the charges against the Uhuru 3. January of 2024, a magistrate judge denied that motion for dismissal. So a trial date has been set for September 3rd, 2024 in Tampa, Florida. The Uhuru 3 are calling on everybody to show up for this historic trial and to participate in our Not One Step Backwards march and rally taking place on August 31st in St. Petersburg, Florida. The charges against the Uhuru 3 are going to reveal a historical and ongoing escalation on the attacks of free speech, our freedom to organize and our freedom to struggle for liberation of African, Indigenous, and all oppressed peoples of the world. So for more information, you can visit the handsoffuhuru.org website. Drop the charges on the Uhuru 3, hands off Chairman Omali Yeshitela, hands off Africa, and no to the RIMPAC games, Uhuru.
Thank you, Zai. I very much sympathize with the struggle of African women, especially in workplace violence, impoverished conditions, and the neglect and abuse of Black children. I share my condolences to those who have been lost under the U.S. war machine. When you were sharing, I was reminded of my family in the Philippines who are also still living in impoverished conditions and having their land stolen through feudalism, U.S. imperialism, bureaucratic capitalism, which are the three basic problems in the Philippines. We do call these the three basic problems because, you know, we all want to work for national liberation, democracy. So I do appreciate you being here and speaking out to oust all war criminals and, you know, justice for all, because none of us are equal until we all are. The next speaker will be Sammy from PYM, also known as the Palestinian Youth Movement. So take it away, Sammy.
Yeah, thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Samuel Qasim, a member of the Palestinian Youth Movement, as well as a part of the International League of People's Struggles Mid-Atlantic Formation. Let's be clear that NATO is not focused on asserting its aggression in the North Atlantic only, but rather all across the globe. NATO does not hide this fact, making it clear with its Mediterranean dialogue consisting of Mauritania, Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Egypt, Jordan, and of course, the Zionist entity of Israel. From its mobilization against Iraq during the Gulf War to its role in the occupation of Afghanistan and destruction of Libya, NATO serves as the military wing of U.S. imperialism, forcing countries in Southwest Asia and North Africa, also known as the Middle East, to submit or face destruction. Though the Zionist entity of Israel is not a NATO member, it is a founding member of NATO's Mediterranean dialogue and receives nearly complete support from all NATO member countries. As a very active partner, Israel has conducted joint military exercises and military technology exchanges with NATO countries for decades. Even as recent as October 12th of last year, Israeli and NATO leaders met following the Palestinian Resistance's operation to break the 17-year-long Israeli siege of Gaza. Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said that NATO condemned the Palestinian resistance in the strongest possible terms, adding that Israel does not stand alone. And so we see that NATO continues to support Israel as the main outpost of U.S. imperialism in the Middle East. Member countries use NATO's strategy of security through wars of counterterrorism, counterinsurgency, and mass surveillance abroad to suppress people's struggles in its home countries, just like the Palestine Solidarity Movement in the US. And so that's why we say to resist NATO is to resist Zionism and US imperialism. As the great Palestinian revolutionary and martyr Ghassan Kanafani said, imperialism has laid its body over the world, the head in Eastern Asia, the heart in the Middle East. Its arteries reaching across Africa and Latin America. Wherever you strike it, you damage it, and you serve the world revolution. Free Palestine, from the river to the sea, and let's keep working to resist NATO and cancel RIMPAC. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sammy. I really did appreciate the recap and I did appreciate your you speaking out about Palestine and Gaza and how we could all do better to contribute as a global community. I very much appreciate and sympathize. All right. Our next speaker will be Netfa from PACA.
Good afternoon, or good morning, or good evening, wherever people may be. Thank you for inviting PACA to be on this press conference. I'm with Pan-African Community Action, also known as PACA, and PACA brings a Pan-Africanism, revolutionary Pan-Africanism to Washington, D.C. We see our connection as African people is bound up and inextricably connected to that of other Black people, other people of African descent all around the world. We are a member organization of the Black Alliance for Peace, and we also assert the same analysis that African people are a domestic colony in the U.S. settler colonial project. We have the same relationship to the power structure and to the metropoles as that of a colonized to the colonizer. And so our struggle is against colonization and against all capitalism, all these forms of domination. We want to point out that in Washington, D.C., because it's the citadel of imperialism, it's the capital of imperialism, as we call it. It has a plethora of various police agencies that are really, these things are really to uphold the same interests as the NATO forces. There's all kind of police jurisdictions, Metro Police Department, Metro Transit Police, Secret Service, Park Police, Capitol Police, Housing and Urban Development Police. There's all kinds here in Washington, D.C. And as we know that Washington, D.C. is off to the center for national protests, as we've seen with Gaza and Palestine. Palestine, we've been, people come to D.C. for that. And as such, Washington, D.C. has to be very militarized, pretty much a police state. I think that many of us are proud and delighted that July 6th and to the 7th will be the No NATO protest in Washington, D.C., and we plan to participate in that. But it's an example of why Washington, D.C. and the people of Washington, D.C. have to actually bear the brunt of the U.S. settler colonial police state tactics. You can see also the double standard of how that is Washington, D.C., how the police and law enforcement responded to the January 6th attacks on the Capitol versus how they responded to the George Floyd uprisings in D.C., where they used tactics like kettling against the demonstrators. And of course, lots of massive arrests and draconian sentences against people. The Washington, D.C., the Metropolitan Police are often collaborate with federal law enforcement agencies like the FBI. They've been so much evidence has been uncovered on that. 700,000 pages of documents showing this collaboration with the FBI and other federal law enforcement agencies. So there's a incestuous relationship with that. Just today, the Washington Post reports, or not today, yesterday, Washington Post, or a couple of days ago, the Washington Post reported how the police are going to begin to deploy drones alongside officers. And so there's that type of thing that's going on here that PACA and other organizations are working against. One of the main things that we're subjected to as a result and as a reflection of NATO and Western dominance in the settler colonial and the bounds of the settler colonial U.S. is a crime bill in Washington, D.C., and that is targeting working class African people and particularly the youth. It doesn't offer anything to address the root causes of street level crime. So it's really just to criminalize African youth and the Black working class, denying such things as wearing face masks and more stricter penalties for fare evasion and collecting information of people because of fare evasion, drug-free zones. There's a lot in it. It's even been denounced, this crime bill, by the DC office's own racial equity council office on racial equity, which talked about how it would increase mass incarceration, but they've done it despite this. And so a lot of other things are hidden or it's put in the bill to the in the blind spots of the activists, like obscuring disciplinary records from public police's disciplinary records from public view, narrowing the right to a jury trial, and also the weakening of things like calling for the weakening of things like police chokeholds and things like that. So we understand that what NATO is doing and what NATO's purpose is, and what we refer to in PACA and in the Black Alliance for Peace as the U.S., EU, NATO axis of domination. What the U.S. police, what the D.C. law enforcement does here is to uphold the law of settler colonialism and capitalism imperialism. And so, as was said before me, that our fight is to build community-based power that culminates into a massed internationalist movement against the US-EU axis of domination, and being able to raise and see ourselves as an extension of the global South and raise the interest of the global South against capitalism and imperialism. Thank you.
Thank you, Netfa. Very strong words, just to describe how DC and the DMV area really relates back to US imperialism and capitalism, even bureaucrat capitalism, like I mentioned earlier. And, for those who are just coming in or sliding into the Zoom call and press conference, we, as the Resist NATO campaign, which stands for, NATO means the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, in which they geographically try to control a lot of nations, including Hawaii, including the Philippines, including Palestine, including Pan-African nations. And we do have to be aware globally and even nationally, and even regionally, locally in our DC communities, to just really reach out to other communities and connect. And overall, I really did appreciate your speech. It was very well thought of with the global communities in DC and how it's been over policed and taken over by US imperialism through tourism. And even what I noticed on the metro was or the metropolitan area is just people full of tourists and and just taking up so much space for even the Palestine marches that's been happening recently in DC. So thank you, Netfa. Our next speaker is Nina from Bayan. And yeah, take it away, Nina.
Hello, everyone. I am speaking on behalf of Bayan USA, an alliance of 30 progressive Filipino organizations across the United States. We are a proud member of the International League of People's Struggle, a global alliance of over 300 organizational members, in which initiated the Resist NATO coalition. As Filipinos, we are participating in the Resist NATO coalition as well as the Cancel RIMPAC coalition because our home country, despite being an independent country on paper, is still dominated by its former colonial master, the United States, economically, politically, culturally, and militarily. My people have been resisting US foreign domination for over a century now. This year, 2024, marks the 125th year since the Philippine-American War, a little-known war where the US committed a genocide against almost 1 million Filipino people in order to colonize the Philippines after Filipino revolutionaries defeated our former colonizer, Spain. So without a doubt, we unite with all peoples of the world in our call, cancel RIMPAC, resist NATO, US out of the Philippines and everywhere. As a tool of US and European imperialism to advance its agenda around the world, NATO is consolidating military alliances in the Asia-Pacific to contain and isolate US's rival China. This means escalating war in the Asia-Pacific region, putting regular people in countries like the Philippines in utter danger. Though the Philippines is not a member of NATO, the US has designated the Philippines as a major non-NATO ally. This is because the US has long used the Philippines as a launching pad for war into the Asia-Pacific. The Philippines occupies a similar client status as Israel and Ukraine, which receive millions, even billions of US military aid to uphold US interests, while the people within the US struggle to meet their basic needs. NATO has clearly stated their intent to expand its outreach efforts into Asia, as written in its NATO 2030 plans, which is basically NATO's strategic plans for the decade. NATO explicitly labeled China alongside Russia as its #1 enemy. These plans mirror the Biden administration's Indo-Pacific strategy dated February 2022, which aims to contain the DPRK in China, especially as China is increasing its position in the region. In April, former NATO Supreme Allied Commander James Stavridis wrote an opinion piece in Bloomberg stating that NATO should recruit Asia-Pacific countries that share its quote-unquote vision of freedom, such as Singapore, Philippines, Japan, Thailand, and others. Even if these nations are not yet members, they have already been developing close ties with NATO. Since 2022, Japan and South Korea have attended the military alliance's annual summits. Last year, NATO reportedly considered setting up a liaison office in Japan. In the Philippines, 4 new bases were opened up last year for the use of the US military. There are likely many more secret bases being funded through the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement and other unequal US military agreements with the Philippines. All of these new bases face China, forming what we call the first island chain, linking together military outposts between Japan, Taiwan, Philippines, and Borneo. Rising tensions between and among rival superpowers, compounded with the presence of multilateral military alliances like RIMPAC and NATO, ensure that if there is war, it will be more devastating for the people and the environment. Ultimately, it is the people, not their governments, who endure the worsening deterioration of human rights because of these military expansionist activities. We know that the US will continue to peddle lies to manufacture consent among the Filipino people for war against China. Just this month, we learned that the Pentagon generated fake propaganda and spread disinformation against Chinese vaccines during the pandemic, which could have saved many, many lives in the Philippines. The US government does not care about Filipino lives. So once again, we cry, cancel RIMPAC, resist NATO, US out of the Philippines and everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Nina from Bayan USA, for sharing the important information on how the Philippines has been impacted by the US's continued escalation of war in the Asia Pacific against China through NATO and the impact on the people of the Philippines and throughout the Pacific. Next, we're going to go into our question and answer time. We're going to go ahead and start with a question directed to Rose from JVP Hawaii. Why is it important for movements on the continent, in Hawaii, and around the world to coordinate in resistance against RIMPAC?
Could you repeat the question just once more so I can fully digest it?
Yes, absolutely. Why is it important for movements on the continent, in Hawaii, and around the world to coordinate in resistance against RIMPAC?
Great question. I think that we must coordinate together because it is intrinsic to our survival. We either resist RIMPAC and the US-led war machine, or we die. That's it. Like at the rate of the way that the US and its allies contribute to the desecration of the environment, contribute to mass death and destruction by funding different genocides, whether it's in Palestine, in Kanake, in West Papua, there is no other option. So if you want me to expand on that, I can, but.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a great answer. If anyone else from the Cancel RIMPAC campaign also wants to speak to it, Eric or Zai, also feel free. Excellent. If no one else has additions, we'll go ahead and move to the next question that came from the audience. How can our organizations continue to work together with the organizations represented here against the Rim of the Pacific after this year's exercises are over? Is there a broader coalition we can join, or does this campaign continue after this weekend? So I'll go ahead and give just a quick answer to that, and also invite any of the other Cancel RIMPAC speakers, Rose, or anyone else to share too. In terms of the International Cancel RIMPAC campaign, our main peak activities here in the US are really happening on the 29th and 30th in San Diego. We'll have a summit and a mobilization, but we also know that RIMPAC happens every 2 years. It's a program of the US government to ensure that it happens regularly, especially as they're escalating war in the Indo-Pacific region. And so we know that while in this moment, the campaign might wrap up after RIMPAC is over in August, there will be activities throughout the month of July and August in Hawaii. We know that the campaign will have to relaunch again in 2 years, and our goal really is to continue growing the campaign against RIMPAC, to expand it more internationally, to bring more support to the people in Hawaii who have been carrying out this campaign for so long, and to also continue to expose US-led war. So we don't have a formal coalition at this point. It really is a campaign that we're waging, but for sure, organizations that want to participate can continue to participate in the Cancel RIMPAC campaign for years to come. And we know it's part of the overall anti-war campaigns that are being led by Buy in USA, Resist US-Led War Network, and International Women's Alliance. And so we want to ensure that these campaigns don't get seen as the main campaign or as the main aspect, but that we're also waging anti-war actions throughout the year, all the time. Eric or Rose, do you want to add anything? Rose, if you want to add more about what's happening in Hawaii throughout the exercises too, that would be great.
Yeah, of course. So I'll start by saying, like, our coalition throughout the duration of the RIMPAC exercises, like, if you're here in Hawaii, there's going to be punk shows where there's going to be like, we're working on getting like paddle outs, different forms of protest, street theater, really working on getting in contact with the like broader community here in Hawaii who also may not be super like aware of what's going on right off of our shores as well. So and I also just want to bring up something that one of the like legacy organizers of RIMPAC, Auntie Laulani, says is like, oh, you know, every year we tell ourselves that we're going to get a head start, we're going to get working on it right away, we're going to be super organized, and then because there is so much to fight back against, that it comes up, it sneaks up on you every year. And so while it may be kind of hard to get something like formal with like a coalition name or whatever, but like start thinking about whether you're here in Hawaii, on the continent, wherever you are, like, again, reading up on RIMPAC, having conversations with your friends and your family members, with your cat who don't know what RIMPAC is or what it's about. Bring it up in conversation, start talking about it to get people more aware, because so many people don't know that this level of desecration is happening every 2 years. And I think that's something that's really, really crucial. So yeah, and there's also there is more to come, but because of the way that people just pop up. But yes, that's what I have.
Thank you, Rose. I appreciate responding back to Katie's question that has been sent through the masses. I wanted to read something that Zayi actually sent in the chat. The Hands Off the Uhuru Fight Back Coalition is a non-sectarian, anti-colonial free speech coalition to make the demand to drop the charges against the Uhuru 3 and to defend the right to freedom of speech. Founded on July 8th, 2023, our coalition embraces the struggles for self-determination, liberation, and freedom of speech of African, Indigenous, and oppressed peoples and voices around the world. And I think from what you said, Rose, I would really like to commend you to allow just holding so much solidarity when it comes to being here, just being here, at this press conference, and being here to represent part of the Cancel RIMPAC and Resist NATO campaign coalition. Yeah, and I also appreciate Katie bringing up the common issue that we all have our national liberation struggles that we need to fight for, especially around the world and globally. Palestine, and what we say in our movement is from Palestine to the Philippines, stop the U.S. war machine. And I think it's important not to make things a trend. Obviously, Palestine is in a trend, the Philippines is in a trend, Hawaii is in a trend. So thank you so much. So Katie,
we do have actually one more question that I want to direct to Eric and Nina, if that's okay. So this is from Sophia with Red Phoenix News. Eric, we'll start with you if that's all right. What are some of the expected and desired material outcomes of the different actions and campaigns? So specific to Cancel RIMPAC, what are some of the hopes for the Cancel RIMPAC campaign's impact on communities?
Yes. We're just really getting started with the Cancel RIMPAC campaign here in San Diego, and we this is the first time that we're launching coordination with Hawaii and internationally, and we hope that through this opening salvo that we can grow the movement and grow the campaign across the world, and particularly here. In San Diego, Southern California, West Coast, and across the country. And because many people, even here in San Diego, are not aware of RIMPAC unless they're, the families of Navy people have actually participated in RIMPAC. That's all they know. And when we are doing, when people are doing outreach in the streets and in San Diego about educating about RIMPAC, you would hear community members saying, I thought RIMPAC was a good thing. And so this is really part of the awareness raising right now so that we can build a strong movement to oppose RIMPAC in the coming years.
Thank you, Eric. Nina, will have you answer the same question about the Resist NATO campaign.
Yes, thank you. So I'd like to be able to say that after the weekend of July 6th and 7th, that we will be able to abolish NATO. But unfortunately, we are realistic in our expectations. And like Eric said, really these mobilizations are meant to change the public discourse around these military alliances, which are often operating in secret. So even exposing and opposing what these military alliances are actually doing and how they are impacting our home countries is very crucial. And as Bayan USA, we view our participation in the Resist NATO coalition as very important in mass movement building here in the United States. We're already seeing a growing united front building within the US that is saying no to war, that is saying no to the two rotten political parties, and the fact that both Democrats and Republicans have been selling out our people constantly, how they are pro-genocide. and pro-weapons profiteering. So for us, we view this as a very crucial moment in the anti-war movement to further build the momentum that the student intifada showed us is possible, to further build that momentum and usher in a new generation of anti-war activists that will sustain the movement that's been built up by so many others for many years to come. This, Resist NATO protest is not the first one. We are following in the footsteps of many other countries that have continuously protested NATO wherever it is. So that's really what we are trying to do, really change public opinion, organize more people to be able to join organizations. That is the material impact that we are fighting for, because that's really what's going to bring the long-term change.
Thank you, Nina. Yeah, I agree 1,000%. +1 on that. And I was recently in the a part of the anti week of action in SoCal. Someone have to remind me of which one it was, but we learned a lot about neoliberalism and how that connects to Starbucks workers and for me, in this area, the Jollibee workers. And I really do appreciate Nina, who is this is the secretary of the National Council of Bayan, that that we do all stick together, and try to struggle it out, as we say in our movement. And I also wanted to read a message from Victor Simoes, that was sent in the chat. It had 6 likes, so I wanted to read it out just to close off our Q&A. As part of the Cancel RIMPAC Week of Action, the International Migrants Alliance is hosting a border integration to learn directly from grassroots migrants and service organizations about the struggle at the border against heightened militarization, government neglect, and the repression of migrants. So I think, under Bayan, since we are we are a umbrella organization for organizations such as Migrante USA, Migrante DMV, Bayan DMV. It's so easy to lose the vision, or lose that sight, or lose that hope, for national liberation. But just I think becoming organized can really be the first step to achieving true liberation and true sovereignty over our global nations. Thank you, Nina.
Yeah, thanks, Gabby. And thanks to all of our speakers today for your responses to the Q&A, as well as your statements and reflections and perspectives on these 2 campaigns that are being waged. What's clear is that no matter which campaign is being taken up, whether it's the Resist NATO or Cancel RIMPAC, the anti-war movement is growing as the US continues to ramp up its war campaigns. The ships in the Pacific gathering for RIMPAC and the NATO forces assembling in DC do not have the interests of the majority of the people at heart. In reality, a majority of people around the world are suffering from a deep economic crisis, burdened by hunger, illness, and poverty, which is beyond preventable. These massive expenditures on war games and military summits do nothing to address the true needs of the people. This is why people around the world oppose US-led war and are fighting for national sovereignty and just and lasting peace.
Thank you, Katie. So for this press conference, it is just the start of an entire run of actions happening in Hawaii, San Diego, Washington, D.C., and many other nations beyond that. We want to invite everyone here to participate in the days of action starting today and running through the month of July. Please follow at Cancel RIMPAC Campaign and at resist.nato on Instagram. The links to learn more about both campaigns are plugged in the chat. So thank you everybody for being here and have a great rest of your day. Yes, and please follow the links. Thank you.